Welcome to JavaScript Talks. We're going to learn variable number of arguments in JavaScript. In JavaScript, every function supports variable number of arguments. You don't have to write anything special. Let me explain. Suppose I have written a function sum and I want to call this function as sum1 or 2 or sum1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can add any number of arguments, doesn't matter. So in JavaScript, actually the function signature doesn't matter. Only the function name matters. And in the function, suppose I'm getting the arguments as a and b, then what happens for the first scenario? A will be 1, b will be 2, and 3, 4, 5 will be ignored. Just it will be ignored, right? And suppose I have 3 arguments a, b and c. So in that case, for the first call, a will be 1, b will be 2, and c will be undefined. If you're accepting 3 arguments and you're only passing 2 arguments, the third argument will be simply undefined. This is how JavaScript functions work. But the question is how to implement this function now. It should support any number of arguments. First, I will implement it with ES5, that is the old JavaScript. In JavaScript, we have one keyword called arguments. Okay, this arguments is like an array, and it stores all the arguments that is passed, right? So we don't need a, b and c. We can just use this argument array to access all the arguments that is passed. Okay, I'm going to just call it only once, sum 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to log these arguments. Let's see what happens. Now I'm going to run it, and you can see in the arguments array I'm getting all the arguments that is passed. This arguments keyword, this is not actually an array. This is like an array, but it's not actually array. Let me explain. If I put a breakpoint here and run it, and if I inspect these arguments, you can see the prototype of these arguments is object. It's not actual an array. So if I call arguments instance of array or not, it will return false because argument is not actual an array. And that is why you cannot use the array methods like arguments.map or arguments.reduce. You cannot do that. That is not available. So this arguments is actually one object that stores the argument that we pass. It is not actually an array. But how to use it? As it is an object, you can use for loop. I'm using for of. So for num of arguments. So in this loop, num is going to point all the arguments that we are passing. So if I log it, now if I run it, you can see we're getting all the arguments that was passed. Now simply we can have a variable called result goes to 0, initialize it to 0, and then in a for loop, you just increment the result with the num and return result. So this sum function can accept any number of variables. Let's test this. Console log. Now if I run this, showing 15, that is working fine. Now if I just call the function with 2 arguments, 1 and 2, and run it, it's showing 3. So it is working. Now you have to be a little cautious when you're using arguments. Suppose you have one inner function, right? Suppose you have a set timeout, inside that you have a function, and inside that you want to use arguments. So in this case, this argument will not work here because this argument will point to how set timeout will call this function, right? It will not point to the outer sum function. So that is something to remember when you use arguments. Alright, so let's go to ES6 version of variable arguments. I'm going to remove all the code here, and I'll write the same code with ES6. In ES6 we have a rest operator. If you use ... then any name, like I can call it rest or args. So in this case, this arg variable stores all the arguments that is passed, and this argument is not an object, it is actually an array. So we can use args.map or args or reduce. Let's implement this function with reduce. Okay, return args dot reduce, then result and num, and return result plus num, initialize with 0. Run this code. This swing 3 is working fine. Let's test it with another argument. Let's test it one more time. This is working fine. So when you use ES6 REST operator, you'll be able to use any array methods, because this argument, this args, is a real array. In ES6 you have a lot of flexibilities as well. Suppose you want to capture some parameters, some arguments, like first argument. Suppose you are capturing first argument as A, second argument as B, and the rest of the arguments you can capture with args. That is also possible, and this is a common ES6 practices that is used. Like instead of using args, we normally call it rest. So it is like we are getting A and B, and rest of the arguments we are getting in the rest array. This is how it works. So I hope you have learned something in this video. If you liked it, please hit like and subscribe to JavaScript Talks for more videos like this, and thanks for watching.